Most people don't realize the moment their mind starts to break. It doesn't happen during some massive failure or tragic collapse. It happens on a random Tuesday when you tell yourself, "What's the point?" It's the quiet surrender to doubt, the subtle acceptance of mediocrity, and once that seed is planted, it grows silently, until one day you don't recognize yourself. You're still functioning, still showing up, but your spirit, your will, is nowhere to be found. The Stoics warned us, it's not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to truly live. And to truly live, you need a mind that doesn't fold under pressure. You need an attitude that doesn't depend on the weather of your life to feel steady inside. You need inner control, not because the world is fair, but because it rarely is. And if you can master that, if you can stand when everything in you wants to sit, you'll unlock a kind of power no one can take from you. This is not about motivation. It's about mental strength, quiet, resilient, immovable. That's what we're building here, together. If that's a path you're ready to walk, consider subscribing, not just to follow this channel, but to commit to a way of thinking that makes you unshakable. There's a strange heaviness some people carry every single day, but it's not from what they think. It's not the job, the debt, or the stress. It's the quiet weight of all the moments they gave up on themselves without even realizing it. The decision they postponed because it felt uncomfortable. The promise they made to themselves and silently broke. The boundaries they allowed others to cross without resistance. And over time, all of it builds into something invisible but suffocating, like an anchor tied to the mind. You don't always feel the pull, but you feel its consequences. Fatigue without action, emptiness after achievement, and a quiet dread that follows you even in peace. It's subtle, almost gentle. But that's what makes it dangerous. No one wakes up one day completely defeated. It happens gradually, not through collapse, but through quiet surrender. And the saddest part is that most people have no idea it's even happening. They keep moving forward, dragging that weight through their days, wondering why joy feels distant and focus feels impossible. The anchor never announces itself. It hides in self-betrayal that felt too small to matter. One skipped workout, one avoided conversation, one moment of silence when you should have stood up for yourself. That's how it starts. Not with a bang, but with permission. Permission to settle. Permission to lie to yourself just a little. The Stoics warned us that habits, once formed, shape our character more than our thoughts. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But what happens when you don't exercise that power? When you let outside events slowly write your inner script? You stop choosing your life, and you begin reacting to it. The worst part about this internal erosion is that it's quiet, and anything quiet is easy to rationalize. You tell yourself you're just tired, that it's just a phase, that everyone feels this way sometimes. And maybe they do. But not everyone stays there, because some people eventually wake up. They realize they've been carrying something they never needed to carry, not their past, not their guilt, but their refusal to confront it. That refusal is the real weight, and it becomes so familiar that people stop questioning it. They call it their personality or their limits, when in truth, it's just layers of unaddressed moments stacked one on top of the other. There's a difference between rest and resignation. Rest is what you do when you've worked hard. Resignation is what happens when you've lost belief in your ability to change. And it doesn't come from failure, it comes from avoidance, from putting off the hard truths in favor of temporary comforts. But no comfort is truly comfortable if it costs you clarity. And when your mind is clouded, your life starts to drift. You don't even know where you're going anymore. You're just moving for the sake of movement, hoping something will feel right again. But nothing does, because the thing that needs fixing isn't outside, it's you. Not in the sense that something is wrong with you, but in the sense that something powerful inside you has been neglected. You've handed your attitude over to convenience, to emotion, to habit, and now it's time to take it back. Cutting that invisible anchor doesn't start with a grand gesture. It starts with a quiet decision. A decision to stop betraying yourself in small ways, to stop telling yourself it doesn't matter, because it does. Every time you let your standards drop to avoid discomfort, you're voting against your future. Every time you silence your instinct to speak truth or make a change, you're feeding that anchor, and it grows, until one day you're dragging a version of yourself you don't even recognize. You don't need to fix everything today, but you do need to stop feeding what's breaking you. That means honesty, ruthless honesty, not just with others, but with yourself. Where are you making excuses? Where are you pretending not to care? Where have you convinced yourself that it's too late? These aren't just questions, they are mirrors, and it takes courage to look into them. But if you do, you might just see that the person you want to become isn't far off. They're just waiting for you to stop dragging the version that quit. Most people never notice when the giving up begins because it doesn't feel like a crisis. It feels like a choice, a small one. But those small choices shape the mind. They create a version of you that tolerates less from yourself. And the more you tolerate, the more you forget what it's like to be powerful. Because power doesn't come from loud achievements. It comes from quiet consistency, from choosing your values even when no one is watching, from showing up when the feeling is gone, from choosing growth over ease, again and again. The anchor that holds most people back is never the world. It's the story they've accepted about themselves. A story written not in trauma or tragedy, but in small silences. Silent guilt, silent regret, silent settling. But silence is not strength, not when it replaces action. The mind is a tool, but left unattended it becomes a trap. And if you don't take control of it, it will take control of you. It will guide you to comfortable decisions, safe choices, shallow thinking, and slowly you'll trade depth for distraction. That's the cost of a weak mental attitude. Not failure, but the slow, painful erosion of meaning. You wake up one day and realize nothing feels real anymore. You go through motions, smile when needed, perform when required, but the light's gone out. That's what happens when you carry the anchor long enough. It doesn't just slow you down, it dulls you. And the scariest part, you get used to it. You get used to living with less than you deserve. Less peace, less clarity, less courage, until the memory of your potential becomes a stranger. But it's never too late to remember who you were before you started dragging that weight. It's never too late to draw a line and say, no more. Because the mind can be trained, the story can be rewritten, the anchor can be cut. But only if you're willing to stop pretending it isn't there. Only if you're willing to stand still, look inward and say, this ends with me. That moment is the first real sign of power. Not when you appear strong, but when you decide to become strong again. Most people are fighting the wrong battles. They spend their energy trying to fix their job, their partner, their bank account, their past. But the true battlefield is not out there. It's not in the chaos around them. It's in the chaos within. And until you recognize that, you'll keep treating symptoms while the sickness grows. You weren't broken by the rejection. You were broken by what you told yourself it meant. It wasn't the loss that crushed you, it was the story that followed. I'm not enough. This always happens to me. Nothing ever works. The world didn't destroy you. Your interpretation did. And that's the enemy that most people never see. the one whispering in their own voice, inside their own mind, pretending to be truth when it's just fear in disguise. The Stoics warned us about this long ago. They knew the real threat was not the pain we face, but the lens through which we see that pain. Epictetus said, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them." It's your view, your filter, that determines whether a moment becomes your downfall or your transformation. But most people don't know they're looking through a filter. They think their perception is the truth. And that's where they get trapped. Because you can't change what you won't question. You can't fix the lens if you think it's a window. That's why some people collapse under pressure while others rise from it. It's not about strength. It's about how they choose to see. The one who falls sees obstacles as personal attacks. The one who rises sees them as invitations to grow. And the difference is not luck or fate or even talent. It's attitude. That internal posture you take when things don't go your way. That tiny moment when something hurts and you decide, consciously or not, what that hurt will mean. Most people don't choose in that moment. They react, and their reaction becomes a habit. Over time, they stop seeing the world for what it is and start seeing it only through their past pain. That's when life starts to feel like a repeating loop. The same patterns, the same fears, the same results. Not because the world is against you, but because you've become loyal to the version of yourself that was shaped by hurt. You've internalized your wounds as identity, and that's what the enemy within does. It convinces you to carry the voice of your pain into every room you enter. So even when things are good, even when people love you, even when you have a chance to grow, you sabotage it. Not because you want to suffer, but because suffering has become familiar. And in a strange way, familiarity feels safer than change. But the truth is, the enemy within is not unbeatable. In fact, it weakens the moment you recognize it for what it is. A set of automatic interpretations you've been rehearsing for years. And if it was learned, it can be unlearned. If it was built, it can be dismantled. But not by blaming the world. That's what keeps people stuck. They think, once my situation changes, I'll feel better. But it doesn't work that way. You don't wait for peace, you create it. Not by controlling the storm, but by calming the voice inside that keeps screaming about it. Real control doesn't come from bending life to your will. It comes from mastering your lens, how you see, how you think, how you respond. Because if your inner world is in disarray, no amount of success will bring you peace. You'll still find a way to feel lost. You'll still doubt yourself in the quiet moments. You'll still carry that restlessness, that edge, that feeling that something is off, even when everything looks fine on the outside. That's the trap of chasing change without fixing perception. You reach your goals, but your mind stays the same. And eventually, it pulls you back to where you started. You don't need the world to be easier. You need your mind to be stronger. And strength doesn't come from avoidance. It comes from confrontation, facing the stories you've been telling yourself, interrupting them, challenging them, replacing them, not just once, but over and over, until your mind knows a new way, until your first instinct isn't self-blame or panic or shutdown, but calm, clarity, and resolve. That's when you know the enemy within is no longer in charge, when your reactions no longer rule your reality. Carl Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And maybe that's why most people never look inside, because what they find there isn't just darkness, it's potential. And potential demands responsibility. It demands you stop making excuses. It demands you rise above the comfort of victimhood and claim authorship over your perception. That's the hard part. It's easier to believe the world is the problem. But once you see the pattern, once you realize it's your interpretation shaping your experience, you can never unsee it. You either grow or you pretend. There's no middle. And growth starts with awareness, not just knowing your thoughts, but watching them, listening to the way you speak to yourself when no one else can hear. Do you speak power or pity? Do you rise to the challenge or replay your doubts? That voice inside you, it's not fixed, it's not fate, it's a habit. And like any habit, it can be rewired, slowly, intentionally, with patience. Every time you choose a new interpretation, every time you shift your perspective from why me to what now, you are dismantling the enemy within. You are not your failures. You are not your past reactions. You are not the voice in your head that doubts everything good. You are the one who chooses whether to keep listening. That's your power. That's where freedom lives, not in what happens to you, but in how you frame it. That's the art of building an unbreakable mind, refusing to let circumstances define your identity, refusing to let pain become your language, and refusing to let the enemy within be louder than the purpose pulling you forward. Most people never realize how much control they have over their reality. Not the external world, that will always move the way it moves, but their inner world, the place where meaning is made, that's where the real power lies. Something difficult happens, and two people walk away from it with entirely different stories. One sees loss, the other sees preparation. One feels punished, the other feels shaped. And the only difference between them isn't luck, intelligence, or circumstance, it's interpretation. That silent, invisible lens that turns experience into either fuel or poison. And most of the time, that lens gets built without our awareness. It's shaped by fear, by old wounds, by things we were told when we were too young to question them. But at some point, if you want to live with strength, you have to take that lens into your own hands. You have to stop reacting and start choosing what things mean. It's a simple truth, but most people never consider it. Nothing in life has meaning until you give it meaning. A delay is not inherently frustrating. A failure is not inherently humiliating. A rejection is not inherently a reflection of your worth. They only become those things when you assign them those labels. But if that's true, if you're the one assigning meaning, then it means you have a say in how any experience shapes you. That's not wishful thinking. That's freedom. And it's not about pretending everything is good. It's about looking deeper and asking yourself what you want to carry forward from it. Do you want this moment to define you by your pain or your growth? Most of what we call suffering doesn't come from the event itself. It comes from the meaning we attach to it. That's why two people can go through the same setback. One crumbles and the other transforms. The event didn't choose their path. Their interpretation did, and that's the part no one teaches you growing up. You're told to chase results, to avoid failure, to seek approval, but no one tells you that the most important thing isn't what happens. It's what you tell yourself afterward. That internal dialogue becomes your reality, and if you don't master it, it masters you. Imagine what would change if your first instinct in hardship wasn't to complain or collapse, but to pause and ask, what is this moment giving me? That one question flips the entire structure of your thinking. It invites patience where there used to be panic. It creates curiosity where there was blame, and it teaches your mind to search for meaning instead of pain. That's not denial, that's discipline. Because it's easy to feel good when things go your way. It's a completely different skill to stay grounded when they don't. And that skill is built in how you interpret. That doesn't mean you have to be happy about everything. It means you stop letting your first reaction run your life. Emotional maturity begins the moment you realize that your feelings are real, but they aren't always right. A moment of anger doesn't require a reaction. A moment of fear doesn't mean you're in danger. Feelings are messengers, not masters, and interpretation is how you decode them. When you pause, breathe, and ask yourself what else this could mean, you begin to see that every situation is layered. There's the surface-level discomfort, and then there's the lesson underneath, if you're willing to find it. The pressure is never the problem. The problem is when you assume pressure is punishment instead of preparation. That assumption, that instant meaning you assign to difficulty, shapes everything. If you believe life is against you, every challenge will confirm it. If you believe life is testing you, every challenge will refine you. It's not about lying to yourself. It's about choosing a mindset that builds strength instead of weakness. The mind is always assigning meaning. It doesn't matter if it's small or large, joyful or painful. Your brain is constantly weaving a narrative. And once that narrative is set, your actions follow. That's why people repeat the same habits, the same emotional spirals, the same self-sabotaging decisions. It's not that they love pain, it's that their story is stuck. Their lens has been unchallenged. But the moment you stop and say, "Is this the only way to see this?" you start loosening that grip. And with each layer you peel back, you gain more freedom. Not to change the event, but to rise above it. That's the hidden key most people never discover. The power of interpretation is the power of transformation. You don't need a new life, you need a new lens. Because the life you're living could already be the breakthrough you're hoping for if you just see it differently. Maybe that delay you hate is actually saving you from a worse outcome. Maybe that closed door is redirecting you toward a better one. But you'll never know if you're always labeling everything as loss. Training the mind to interpret wisely is a daily practice. It doesn't happen by accident. You have to pay attention to your thoughts, especially the quiet ones, the ones you say to yourself when you're alone. If they're filled with blame, guilt, fear, or self-pity, then your lens is dirty. And no matter how good life gets, you'll still feel stuck. But clean the lens, challenge the thoughts, and suddenly the same situation looks different. Not easier, but clearer. And clarity is more powerful than comfort. This doesn't mean you ignore reality. It means you become more responsible for your reaction to it. You stop outsourcing your peace to perfect conditions. You stop believing that external success will fix internal chaos. Because it never will. Peace doesn't come from what happens. It comes from what you decide it means. And if you can train your mind to search for value in adversity, you'll become someone that difficulty can't destroy. Interpretation is the tool that builds resilience. Every time you catch yourself spiraling into negativity, every time you choose to reframe instead of react, you're proving to your mind that it works for you, not the other way around. You're building a mental muscle that can lift the weight of uncertainty, of setbacks, of change. And over time, that mindset becomes your default. You become someone who doesn't flinch when things go wrong, not because it doesn't hurt, but because you've learned how to make pain useful. It's not about controlling every thought. It's about choosing the ones you entertain. And once you take responsibility for your interpretation, you begin to take responsibility for your entire life. That's when everything changes. Not instantly, not dramatically, but steadily. You stop being a victim of what happened. You start becoming a student of it. And from there, no experience is wasted. Every loss becomes a lesson. Every delay becomes development. Every test becomes training. And slowly, you become the kind of person who can't be shaken by ordinary storms, because your lens, your attitude, your interpretation has been sharpened by the extraordinary. There's a common misunderstanding when people talk about mental strength. They imagine it's about being cold, unfeeling, detached, like becoming a stone that nothing can touch. But that's not strength, that's suppression. And suppression isn't power, it's a disguise for fear. Because the truth is, strength isn't about avoiding emotion. It's about no longer being ruled by it. To build an unbreakable mind, you don't kill your feelings. You reclaim authority over them. You acknowledge them, you feel them, but you don't follow them. They speak, but you decide what gets heard. Most people don't realize how much they're being led by emotions until they've already made a decision they regret. They say things in anger, withdraw in sadness, procrastinate under fear, and when the wave passes, they're left wondering why they feel lost. It's not the emotion that broke them, it's the obedience. They thought feeling something meant they had to act on it. But feeling is just information. It's a signal, not a sentence, and the ability to recognize that is where emotional neutrality begins. Neutrality is not indifference, it's stability. It's what happens when you stop reacting to every rise and fall like it's the end of the world. When you stop allowing your day to be hijacked by whatever mood happens to arrive in the morning. An unbreakable mind doesn't fight the weather of emotion. It simply refuses to let it change the course. Like a mountain, present, aware, but unmoved. That's the posture of strength, not because it avoids storms, but because it stands through them without losing its shape. Emotional neutrality is the result of choosing response over reaction. It means noticing what you feel without making it your identity. Saying to yourself, yes, I'm angry. Yes, I'm hurt. But I choose not to let this speak for me. That's not weakness. It's restraint. And restraint is one of the most underrated forms of power, because anyone can explode, anyone can crumble. But to remain centered when everything in you wants to lash out or shut down, that's rare. That's mastery. You don't have to fight your emotions. You only have to stop letting them drive. Picture your emotions like passengers in a car. They can ride with you, but they don't touch the wheel. They don't decide the direction. You acknowledge them, maybe even thank them for showing up, but then you put your hands back on the steering wheel. That's what it means to lead yourself, to feel deeply, but to think clearly. The Stoics knew this. They didn't aim to eliminate feeling. They aimed to elevate reason, to protect their inner calm no matter the outer chaos. Life will not adjust to your emotions, but you can train your emotions to adjust to life. Not by pretending they don't exist, but by refusing to be dragged by them. You learn to say, this is difficult, but it's not destructive. This is painful, but it doesn't define me. That clarity in the face of emotional noise is how resilience is formed. The more often you practice this, the more natural it becomes. At first, it feels like a battle, like you're holding back a flood with your bare hands. But over time, your nervous system adapts. You begin to recognize the waves before they crash. You catch the thoughts before they spiral. And you no longer fear your own reactions because you've built the space between what you feel and what you do. That space is everything. It's where all power lives. The ability to pause, to observe, to choose. Without that space, you are a slave to every sensation. With it, you are free. The mistake most people make is thinking that emotional control is coldness. But if anything, it allows you to love better, connect deeper, and lead stronger, because you're not clouded. You're not bringing past wounds into present moments. You're not bleeding onto people who didn't cut you. Neutrality gives you the clarity to show up as your full self, not your fearful self. And that changes everything. Your relationships, your decisions, your peace. It's easy to be calm when nothing is testing you. But the real test is staying centered when life isn't cooperating, when the deal falls through, when the person disappoints you, when the plan collapses. That's when neutrality is proven, not in theory, but in practice. You get to decide, will I be pulled by emotion or anchored by principle? The latter is what makes you solid. And the more you choose it, the more your default response becomes calm, even when chaos is loud. There will always be moments that shake you: loss, betrayal, unexpected turns. You're not made of steel, you're human. And humanity is not weakness, it's the condition through which strength is built. You don't rise by ignoring your humanity, you rise by organizing it. You take the fear and point it toward action. You take the grief and let it deepen your empathy. You take the anger and channel it into discipline. That's what neutrality gives you, not a lack of feeling, but the ability to aim your feelings where they do the most good. Carl Jung once said, "Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness." The word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness. That balance is what neutrality respects. You're not chasing only light. You're accepting the full spectrum while choosing not to be thrown off course by any single part of it. That's why you don't crumble when the sadness comes. You don't explode when the anger hits. You let it pass through without poisoning your direction. Eventually, this becomes less about self-control and more about self-trust. You trust yourself to stay steady, to think before you speak, to breathe before you decide. And that trust becomes confidence, not loud, not arrogant, but quiet and unshakable. The kind that doesn't need to prove itself, because it already knows where it stands. So no, an unbreakable mind doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you feel everything, but you choose what you follow. You lead even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. That's what separates strength from noise, depth from impulse, power from performance. And the longer you walk that path, the less you react like a leaf in the wind, and the more you stand like a mountain, still grounded, unmoved, no matter what storms come. Most people live in a constant state of reaction. They wake up already on edge, bracing for the next crisis, the next inconvenience, the next disappointment. Their peace is entirely conditional, tied to how the day unfolds, how others behave, how closely reality matches their expectations. And when those expectations are shattered, as they often are, they spiral. But it's not because life is uniquely difficult. It's because their inner world is too fragile to withstand the weight of outer chaos. The truth is, you cannot control the world. It will shift, bend, collapse, and rebuild in ways you never anticipated. But your mind, your perspective, your response, your attitude, that is the only territory you truly own. And most never realize how much power lives there, simply because they've never trained it. To live well, you don't need perfect conditions. You need a prepared mind. Not rigid, not hardened, but steady, like water that adapts, but never loses its depth. That kind of mind doesn't wish the world would be easier. It becomes stronger, more precise, less dependent on comfort, because comfort is a poor teacher. It teaches you to expect softness, to expect predictability. But the world doesn't reward those who expect. It rewards those who adapt. And to adapt, you need structure within. You need a foundation that doesn't crack every time the ground shifts beneath you. You don't need fewer problems. You need better skills. You need a mind that has been through enough inner work that chaos outside no longer feels like a threat, but a reminder. It's time to return to what you've built. Stability isn't about standing still. It's about standing firm. When your values are intact, when your vision is clear, when your self-respect doesn't depend on how others treat you, you move through the world differently. You don't chase validation. You don't beg for peace. You don't crumble when things get uncomfortable. You anchor yourself, not in a moment, not in a mood, but in the habits you've chosen, the beliefs you've refined, the standards you refuse to drop. That's what discipline creates. Not restriction, but clarity. It sharpens your responses. It shapes your posture. It keeps your mind sealed like a vault, untouched by every gust of noise that blows through the day. That doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't get swept. because your center is strong, not because life gave it to you, but because you carved it from the parts of you that used to be weak. That carving is not comfortable. It takes awareness, commitment, and discomfort. But it's the discomfort that reveals where your work is, where you still panic, where you still seek control outside because you haven't claimed it inside. And that's the work most avoid. They would rather manage every possible outcome than learn how to manage themselves. But when you stop fearing the storm, you stop needing to control the sky. You walk into the chaos, not as a victim, but as someone who knows their power doesn't come from prediction, it comes from preparation.